Yet another week has come to an end and we get to see how our favorite movies are doing financially. So let's tear this thing open and see what's cooking. We had a close call this weekend in the domestic top 5, and after a fierce battle for number 1, Transformers Rise of the Beast opened in the top spot with an okay $60.50 million, but that is quite a bit above last week's projections of $37 to $46 million by Box Office Pro. Right on its tail, coming in second place is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, having only dropped 54.1% in its second weekend with $55.43 million. That is a pretty good drop considering how big it opened, so a phenomenal performance domestically for Spider-Man. In third place is The Little Mermaid with another impressive $22.79 million and a 44.9% drop from last week, staying quite competitive 3 weekends in. Number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which only dropped an impressive 34.2% for a $7.03 million 6th weekend. And rounding out the top 5 is The Boogeyman, dropping only 44% in its second weekend. A very impressive hold for sure given the market and its horror genre. In fact, all these films held surprisingly well given how many blockbusters are out right now. Speaking of blockbusters, let's look at how they are doing at the worldwide box office. So far in its first weekend, Transformers has grossed a solid $171 million worldwide. Through its first 10 days, Spider-Man has grossed a great $313.35 million. The Little Mermaid, after 16 days, is starting to truly fall apart overseas, but thanks to its domestic total, it has managed to make $414.21 million worldwide. With $652.75 million is Fast X, after 23 days in release. Not looking too good there, but we'll get into that in a minute. And finally, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 with an impressive $805.90 million after 37 days, showcasing some incredible staying power. Moving on to our profitability calculator, movies don't get all this money back. In fact, they only get 60 to as low as 20% of the dollar amount back depending on what territory the film is playing in. For example, if the film is playing in the United States, the studios get back around 60%, while in China, the studios only get back around 20%. And the rest of the world is right around 50. I think the sweet spot is right around 50%, but to be safe, I'm going to use 45%. How we calculate profitability, however, is we combine the advertising cost, which is usually half of the production budget but not greater than $100 million, with the production budget, and compare that to the approximate box office revenue, which is 45% of the box office gross. The sum of this determines our ROI, formerly known as return on investment. This is probably the final week that I'll be calculating Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. There are just so many of these massive movies coming out, it becomes quite the project to break them down effectively. Having a reported production budget of $250 million and a reported marketing spend of around $100 million, the film costs a whopping $350 million. Worldwide, the film has grossed $805.90 million, bringing the approximate revenue to $362.66 million. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 so far has made a positive return on investment of $12.70 million in its theatrical market. It's certainly a success, but probably not the definitive slam dunk that Marvel Studios wanted. Maybe they should consider spending less money if they want better returns. Fast X also had an absurd budget thanks to massive production issues, inflating its budget to $340 million, and reportedly costing around $100 million to market. That's an insane $440 million spend. So far, the film has grossed $652.75 million, so its revenue is around $293.75 million. That is a return on investment of negative $146.53 million. The budget is killing this movie. If it was even down to $200 million production budget, it would have been profitable already. But instead, this movie is probably going to lose over $100 million in its theatrical run. That's why, as of right now, Fast X is already available to watch at home. As for The Little Mermaid, it had a massive production budget of $250 million and a marketing budget of a whopping $150 million. Usually that amount on marketing is pretty rare, but that's the number that's being reported, so that's what we are going to have to go with. That brings the spend up to $400 million. The Little Mermaid is not playing well overseas, and so far it has grossed $414.21 million and is slowing down. That brings the revenue down to $186.39 million. Far from the $400 million that Disney spent. That's a return on investment of negative $213.61 million. It is possibly too early to call, but I believe this film will also lose over $100 million in its theatrical run. Things are looking much better for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which has a reported budget of $100 million and approximately another $50 million in marketing, making the total spend of $150 million. Right now, Spider-Man sits at $313.35 million at the global box office, bringing its revenue to $141.01 million. Return on investment currently stands at negative $8.99 million, but make no mistake about it, this is the beginning of its run and will be a big winner for Sony Pictures in the months to come. The newly released Transformers Rise of the Beasts, however, is going to be quite the nail-biter moving forwards. With a reported budget of $195 million and going off our current model that puts an approximate marketing budget of around $98 million, that brings the spend around $293 million. With an opening weekend haul of $171 million, Transformers is currently sitting around $76.95 million in actual revenue. Return on investment after week 1 is at negative $216.05 million, and I'm going to be honest, that's not a great place to be in with more big movies coming out soon, and hardly putting a dent in recuperating the cost. For profitability, it looks like the film will need $600 million plus just to break even. Next week, we have the release of The Flash, projected between $72 and $105 million according to Box Office Pro. Honestly, I have no idea how this film is going to do, but I do know one thing, I can't wait to break it down, and so much more on next week's Box Office Report.